Hello and welcome back to the Sam Beast YouTube channel. My name is David Foxen, and as always, before we start, please do not forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and we have been growing a lot over the last few months. Now, if you remember previously in our other webinar, we were looking at the important hardware asset management processes, the core, basic, easy ones for you to go ahead and implement. In that session, we mentioned about additional supporting documentation that you should be creating to complement and support the effectiveness and implementation of these processes. In this webinar, we are now going to go through all of those supporting documentation that you will need when you're implementing your processes. We're going to have a look at all of the ones that I like to do and also some extra ones that you can do depending on your preference, as it is 2024, moving into 2025, and the way that people absorb information is changing a lot. So in the previous webinar, which you can look at, I'll put a link to that video in the description somewhere, we were looking at some of the key and core hardware asset management processes. If you remember, we showed some basic Visio process flows for some of the ones that are bolded there in orange on your screen. So if you haven't watched that, please do go back and watch that one first before you start watching this one, as it will make a lot more sense and you can see all of the processes that we've been talking about. Now, the first set of additional supporting documentation that you should consider and you should have a look at creating to support your processes is a standard operating procedure. And because we're in ITAM, we love an acronym, aka SOP. Or SOP, whatever you want to call it. There's a brief template that I use and have created there that I share to people when trying to explain what a standard operating procedure is there. If you want to have a look at this, screen grab it, feel free to go ahead. It's just a really basic SOP template. So a standard operating procedure is basically instructing how you should be performing the certain process, the action, all the tasks within the process. So it's really kind of giving you information on what the process is actually defining and saying that you should be doing. The layout of it should typically be a step-by-step guide. As you can see on the right-hand side there, you'd have the introduction, the purpose, the scope, and then the deliverable and output. And in there, you can specify as well the step-by-step guides on what you're actually doing. So, for example, in the scope bit, you can put that it is for the software request process or the hardware procurement process or whatever the process may be, the outputs of it, roles, responsibilities, and then you can actually go down into the step-by-step guidance on what each of the blocks or the triangles or the icons or the shapes or whatever you've done your swim lane or your process flow in, what each of them actually mean and who's responsible for what. This makes sure that your processes that you're implementing and using are consistent and effective throughout the whole of the process's journey within the ITAM function within the organization, and also make sure that everyone's singing from the same page, everyone understands what they're meant to be doing. We'll touch upon a work instruction in a second, but you typically don't need to duplicate efforts. You don't need to do a standard operating procedure and a work instruction. This is basically duplicating the work, and we'll explain why when we have a look at the work instruction. Your organization may define that you have to do standard operating procedures, aka the SOPs, and that work instructions are just not done, or you've got the option of doing a work instruction or a SOP. Personally, I prefer work instructions as they allow you to be a bit more creative. They allow you to bring in things like video and stuff like that. But we'll discuss that in more detail as we go through this webinar. So just focus on either a SOP or a work instruction, a WI. So standard operating procedures are a really important document or a work instruction, something, either one of them, to accompany your process, to provide that clarity, to provide that consistency, and to make sure that whatever hardware asset management, software asset management, or ITAM process that you're implementing works, is fit for purpose, and everyone understands what all of the shapes and triangles and whatever else you've got in your process, what they actually mean and what they do. So another really important one, and something that is often overlooked but is critical to the effectiveness of any of your processes or your policies or your controls, is a RACI matrix, another acronym. but this is a responsible, accountable, consulted and informed matrix of the key stakeholders that you are relying on for this process to be effective, for it to work, and for it to actually be followed. So the R, which is responsible, these are the overall stakeholders that are responsible for the completion of that particular part of the process, that task, that shape that you've got, whether it's a sub process, whether that's a decision tree, whether that's an action, whether that's a documentation, whether that's a AMDB update, whatever it is. This is the stakeholder who has overall responsibility for seeing that through. It's also really useful to mark a RACI matrix for the overall process as well. So, but 9 times out of 10, ITAM are responsible for it. ITAM are accountable for it. Senior management are consulted, and stakeholders are informed. So it's a lot more watered down, but it's worth doing if you have the time and you want to do it. But we're focusing on the RACI matrix for the particular individual processes. So yeah, who is responsible for the process and the tasks within the process? Next up, we're looking at accountable, the A within RACI. This is the stakeholder accountable for ensuring the responsible stakeholder completes the task or process. So, for example, the accountability for that process being effective and working may be a different stakeholder or team than who's actually responsible for seeing that the process is completed. So, for example, we may have a process that finance are actually accountable for because it's to do with paying hardware vendors on time, but ITAM are responsible for the actions within that. Or ITAM's accountable for the process, but actually the service desk are responsible for ensuring that that process is followed, executed and done. Do you see what I mean? It can switch between ITAM being responsible and accountable. ITAM might not be accountable but responsible, or ITAM might be accountable and not responsible, or responsible and not accountable. It all depends on the process. It all depends on what you've defined. There is no wrong or right answer. So as long as the RACI matrix matches the process that you're implementing in terms of the stakeholder and their roles and responsibilities, you should be good. So just make sure that when you're building your RACI matrix, have the process flow there with you. I like the swim lane ones, as you saw from the previous webinar, and you can see all of the stakeholders that are listed that are part of that process. When you're building your RACI matrix, have a look at this and make sure that you're matching up each action, each decision tree, each sub process, each document, each data update, etc., to the RACI matrix, and put the line item of what the action is, who's responsible, who's accountable, consulted, informed, etc. Honestly, in some cases, it might seem like it's obvious, it's simple, it's really easy, but there's no harm in really making it super clear when doing your RACI matrix. There's no ambiguity. Everyone knows what they're meant to be doing. It's clear, it's documented. There can be no questions or challenges if anything goes wrong. Consulted are the stakeholder, obviously the C. Consulted are the stakeholder who provides support, data, advice, extra information, etc., to make sure that your task or process is completed. A lot of the times I find that the consulted stakeholder is normally like a senior manager, an ITAM sponsor, for example, or someone like information security or procurement or finance or something like that. As ITAM are going through the process, they might need advice from one of these stakeholders. And the consulted role still plays a key role in the delivery of the process, but they just provide that extra oomph, that extra support, that extra intelligence, so that you can make sure the process that you're implementing or you're following actually does what you want it to do. And then finally for RACI, we've done the R, we've done the A, we've done the C. Of course, the next one is the I, and that is informed. So these are the stakeholders that need to be kept updated throughout the progress of this process. Again, very likely to be an end user or a senior management or a line manager or someone who's not proactively involved in the process, or they may be in other parts of the process, but there are elements of it they just need to be informed of something happening, or there may be a stakeholder that has no other actions within your ITAM process whatsoever, but they need to be kept up to date with certain parts of it. That is where the informed bit comes into play. So really important that you're mapping this out and that you're adding this into your portfolio of documentation when you're building a process. And you can even add in a RACI matrix into an ITAM policy or a HAM policy or a SAM policy or a FinOps or cloud, whatever it may be. You can add a RACI matrix into that policy as well. There's no bad or negative connotations with regards to RACI matrices. They are awesome. They make things clear, concise. People know what they're doing. There's no confusion. Highly recommend RACI matrices. So we mentioned before about the standard operating procedure versus a work instruction and why you don't need both. So there's a couple of different areas here that we're going to look at, and we're going to kind of compare one by one. So, for example, the standard operating procedure is typically broader in scope, covers general processes or policies applicable to a document or the entire organization, whereas a work instruction can be more detailed, more specific, often describing exact steps needed to complete a task within a SOP or a process. So the work instruction really does go into click here, do this, do that, that kind of thing, really, really detailed instructions as to what you're meant to be doing. Whereas the standard operating procedure, whilst it does provide step by step, it doesn't need to be quite so granular. It goes back to what I said before about having a bit more freedom with work instructions. But unfortunately, you may not have that choice within your organization because your organization, as part of their document management, as part of their quality assurance, etc., they just may require you to have SOPs and not have work instructions. SOPs are designed to ensure consistency in the performance of a specific function by providing general guidelines, whereas work instructions focus on the execution of one part of the function, providing that detailed step-by-step instructions on how to perform the specific job. Like I said, click here, do this, run that, do this report, here's how you build it, that kind of stuff. Really detailed information. SOPs are also generally targeted at wider audiences. This can be at departmental level, senior management level, team level, etc. Whereas work instructions are more aimed at the individuals carrying out that particular task. So think about your service desk or tech support teams that need to know, click here, do that, do this, log on to this, etc. That's who the work instructions are more aimed at. SOPs are often more generalized and less technical in format, can be composed as text, workflows, diagrams that describe process at the high level. You remember that template that we showed? If not, go back and have a look. Get a screen grab of it so you can use it if you want to. That was very much more step-by-step on a high-level basis, whereas work instructions can be more technical, more granular, exact measurements and information, times, other parameters that are critical to that task successes. So, for example, it might include, really detailed information that when you're doing a hardware refresh process, that you're conducting a mail merge audit for those that are due for a refresh, or you're doing this report from the AMDB, or you're measuring the time between the scheduled retirement date and when you can actually get kit in. So actually ones that are due for retirement in 6 months' time, but the supply chain, you're not likely to get the cost approved. You see where I'm going with that? It's a lot more detailed. There's a lot more thinking about it, a lot more actions in a work instruction than a SOP. And finally, SOPs are more flexible, allowing some degree of interpretation and modification based on the user. So that's more on how the end user would read a SOP. Whilst you're doing step-by-steps, because it's not as detailed or as granular as a work instruction, the way that you've written it may not be how someone else takes it, if that makes sense. So there is room potentially for it to go wrong. Do you know what I mean? So it's open to interpretation, a lot more open than work instructions. So just be mindful of that. Whereas work instructions, as we've said again and again, detailed step by step, really clear on what you need to be doing, where to be clicking, how to, assign a laptop in the AMDB, how to request a quote, how to get usage information, build a report, that kind of thing. And work instructions aren't just limited to supporting a process. You could create work instructions for whatever action you want people to do. So, for example, I've got hundreds of work instructions that aren't related to a process, that are related to a specific hardware model, a specific office, a specific country, a specific hardware spec, a specific operating system, specific software, specific licensing. There's no end to the amount of work instructions you can create. And whenever you come up with something or you're doing something and you think, oh, that's really good, we should be doing this on a regular basis, write it down. Get it in a work instruction. And work instructions can also take other media formats as well, such as a video. 2024, 2025, video content is king or queen. It really is taking the forefront on how people learn. I've said this so many times before, but whenever I build these work instructions, I do find the viewing figures within clients is a lot higher for videos than it is for written documents. But again, you may not have the freedom or flexibility to define that. That may already be defined by your doc management, quality assurance, etc. teams who own the processes overall, who own the construct of the document, who own the templates, the fonts, the wording, etc. But it's something to think about. In the work instructions are way more strict in order to get things done and to get things done how ITAM have defined it. And they also provide critical information on how to do certain actions within that task. So in summary, I'm a much bigger fan of a work instruction than a SOP because it goes into the detail. Whilst it may take you as an ITAM professional longer to actually build and do, for the person that's executing it, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more user-friendly for them. They have to ask less questions. They feel more validated. They feel more in control and confident on performing the action that ITAM has set out for them to do as part of the process. So for me, if you've got the option, I much prefer work instructions. If you've got the time, feel free to do both if you love writing documentation. Finally, we've also got knowledge articles. Now, knowledge articles are way less formal than the standard operating procedure or a work instruction. You can also do these within your service management tools. Things like ServiceNow have a whole knowledge base. Again, like work instructions, you can make it about anything you want. Again, you can have hundreds. I typically have more knowledge articles than work instructions. But knowledge articles are almost exactly that, right? You can do hints and tips on the warranty that you've got for the hardware, what is covered, what isn't covered under the warranty. You can do why we've got 16 gig of RAM instead of 8 gig of RAM, even going to the consumables, this is the keyboard layouts we have for these regions, etc. Again, you can create a whole host, hundreds of knowledge articles that you promote out to the whole business. These aren't locked down. These are for everyone. And again, I love doing knowledge articles. So just to summarize what they are before I dig into why I love them so much, they provide specific walkthroughs and knowledge of specific problems or common questions. Less formal, can contain images, videos, screen grabs, and even audio. Typically customer facing and stored within an ITSM tool with references for lookups. So a lot in ServiceNow, for example, if there's an incident that comes in, you can actually search the knowledge base to see if there's a fix for that. Super handy, really easy. Video guides can also then be stored in a SharePoint page or central ITAM page. A lot of customers, they like to have the videos in the work instruction, but then also in a separate shared area where they can edit them or they can take bits from and don't disrupt the knowledge article that's been published. I may or may not have, called some of them as ITAM TV or ITAM Tube or anything like that. Cringy, I know, but it does make it more engaging, and it does become a bit of an icebreaker as well. If you can poke a bit of fun at the ITAM TV, and it just kind of breaks the ice a bit. You can have that banter with the teammates and the stakeholders that you want to engage in this content. So whenever you do a new video or whatever, and you put it on ITAM TV or ITAM Tube or whatever you call it, there's just a bit of fun in that, new video published, and you can mock yourself almost with don't forget to like and subscribe or vote 5 stars, that kind of thing. Just a bit of banter, just to kind of try and get people engaged, try and relax it, try and get try and make people realize that you're doing this to help them rather than for fun. Because a lot of the content that goes into here are typically step-by-step video guides on how to do reports, on looking at the warranty information, looking at scheduled retirement, hardware refreshes, actually videos and content on what you're doing from an ITAM perspective. Because again, an old manager always used to say to me, Mark Teasdale, you legend. No, he didn't say that because he'd be saying that about himself. But he always used to say, write everything down. He said, God forbid anything ever happened to you, we wouldn't know what to do. So this is where knowledge articles come in. Any knowledge that you have about the ITAM function that you're working in, that you've configured, that you've set up, that you've matured, whatever it is, write it down so that then the next person can come over and carry on your awesome work. So yeah, if you were hit by a bus today, touch wood, not going to happen. But if that happened, or you won the lottery, that's a much more positive thing, and left the organisation straight away, have you left them in a good position that someone else can come and take over? It may seem really trivial and mundane to you, but for someone else, it could be gold. So create as many knowledge articles as you can, no matter how mundane, boring, easy you think it is, for someone else coming into the organisation. And for that sustainability and continuity of your ITAM function, it is gold. So yeah, please do a lot of knowledge articles in there as well. Like I said at the bottom, there is no limit on what you can do. You can do knowledge articles supporting SOPs. You can do knowledge articles supporting processes, policies, whatever. They are just your knowledge of what you've built up within the organisation. As you can probably tell, because I'm getting quite passionate about it, like the work instructions, I absolutely love knowledge articles. They give you that freedom to, if you do come across a strange licensing metric, a strange hardware configuration, a strange hardware structure, a strange hardware model, whatever it may be, strange warranty terms, just write it down, because it's also useful for you going back and going, yes, I knew that, but because I didn't write it down, I've completely forgotten what happened. Let me spend hours going through my emails or my notes to try and figure it out. And you know, selfishly, it is a really good reference point for you as well, because I know you might have OneNote, you might have your own note-taking stuff where you're putting everything you've learned, but put it in a knowledge article. Then what's the point in having your standard operating procedure, your work instruction, your knowledge articles, your video guides without communication? They are just going to be pixels on a screen if you do not shout about them to the world that you have created this documentation to make everyone's lives easier. There is no such thing as over communication. I firmly believe in that. I do not care if I start annoying people because I'm messaging them daily about a new knowledge article. At least they know it's there. It's not hurting anyone. Just move the email into a folder, or better, actually read what I've sent you. Move it into a folder. I'm still going to email. I do not believe in over communication. I believe in honesty, transparency, getting everything out there, letting everyone know, all of your key stakeholders that are relevant for ITAM, that you've got all of this new documentation and that they have an action in it. They may have a bit in the racing matrix. They may be responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed for something. So of course they need to be aware and understand it. So share those links, attachments, pictures, videos, whatever, for all of the new documents that you're creating. Email it to all of the key stakeholders. Get it out there. Give them links to where it is on your ITAM TV or your knowledge base or your doc management folder or portfolio, wherever it's stored. Give them all of the access. You could even go further and do the webinars, workshops, or deep dives with them to go through the document that you're implementing, to go through it step by step, answer any questions, ask them questions on how they feel about it, what could be changed, any ideas on how that you could make this document better from an ITAM standpoint, but also from their standpoint as a customer of the document. Webinars, workshops, deep dives, they're always a great way of doing that. Maybe have smaller sessions if you've got a lot of stakeholders. Smaller sessions so that those that are maybe less confident in speaking up might feel a bit less overwhelmed and overawed by having so many people on the call. Arrange smaller sessions for people like that. You can also do one-to-one with critical stakeholders who have a huge role in that process or in that document, so they really understand and can nail exactly what you're asking of them. You can also have one-to-ones with senior stakeholders once a month or once every 6 months, once every 9 months, whatever, to go through all of the new processes and documents that you've implemented. I think that's a really good idea, just at least giving them a summary, a quick high-level overview of boom, 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 boom. We've implemented this, 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 and this. We've matured this, 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 and this, and we've created this many knowledge articles for global consumption. Really good idea to be able to do that. Keeps them in the loop, keeps ITAM fresh in their minds as well, which is what you want at a senior management, a VP and SVP level, and just keeps that dialogue and that communication going as well. And if you've got wider company comms, like a IT newsletter or a all company newsletter on, so-and-so's just had a baby and Steve's running this marathon for this cause, that kind of thing. But they also put actual work related stuff in there as well, like successes like the marketing team have managed to color in a new picture. I'm joking, marketing people, you have a very important job, I know. Or finance have managed to spend more money, that kind of thing. Get it in there as well, just promote the fact that ITAM have created 10 really important ham processes, and then put a little line as to what each process does, an email address to you or the ITAM shared box, whatever it is, so that people can then go and ask questions. And just get it out there. Just get that message out there that you're implementing these processes, you're implementing this documentation, these controls, and there's no such thing as over communicating. So please do get it out there. So really hope you enjoyed that one. We're cracking through our hardware asset management webinars at the moment. So first of all, we've got we've done the AI and ITAM processes, basic ham policies and processes. Hopefully you remember that one. And now this one, which is our mini webinar, which is the additional supporting documentation. Our next webinar, which is likely to be in January in the new year, is all about building your hardware asset management strategy. How can you build your ham strategy for 2025? What does a strategy look like? How can it be effective? What do you need to put in there content wise? Who needs to see it? Who needs to approve it? And how can it be realistic and achievable for your organization? And then we're going to go through some other webinars early next year. We've got hardware lifecycle management, ITAD, ham technologies, hardware refresh planning, ham and green IT, and then we're going to conclude with a hardware asset management maturity explained. Once we've done this series of webinars, we're going to look at doing software asset management ones, cloud, and FinOps, and there might be a few rogue hardware asset management ones that come in as well, as and when we get the request to do them, or as and when I think of them and build the content for it. So really do hope you found this useful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we hope that you now have a passion for building work instructions, standard operating procedures, racing matrices, and knowledge articles. And on that note, until next time, happy ITAMing.